You got schooled with Penny and Martin, the real and raw about today's education,
Listener discretion advised, not for the faint of heart.
nor the easily offended. Welcome all out there in podcast land. This is a pilot episode of a podcast that we have called You Got Schooled.
Bum, bum, bum.
I'm Penny.
I'm Martin.
We are two educators in a high school setting, and we decided that we wanted the truth and rawness of what happens in an educational setting to be heard by people, even if it's just one of you out there. That's fine with us. So we are, like I said, two educators, and we want the truth to be heard about the trenches of public education. So we decided what better way than to start a podcast.
So welcome to...
My name's Penny, by the way.
And I'm Martin.
So we thought on this pilot episode, which in all honesty, this is fourth time we've done it?
Recording.
Yes, you would think that...
The third time we didn't press record.
Yeah, we forgot to press record the last time. So we thought that we'd start off this first episode just telling you a little bit about what you'll be listening to. Nothing is rehearsed, obviously.
Well, kind of, with the first three.
Yes, that's true. But just to start off this one, just telling you a little bit about who we are and how we got to be in education, and maybe what some of the things that you'll be listening to when you tune in and subscribe. Martin, how'd you get started in education?
I started out as a paraeducator. This is my 11th year teaching. I ended up transferring over to the Kansas Juvenile Correction Facility, and I started off as a corrections officer, or getting into the corrections officer position. And when they found out that I had educational background, they were like, "Hey, we got an open spot. Would you be willing to come on over?" And so they actually assisted in helping me get my master's degree in special education with an emphasis in mental and behavioral disorders and social emotional, which is a really huge emphasis now here in public schools as well. But
which we will also be talking about in further episodes.
Absolutely. But I spent 6 years there, and I ended up getting pregnant with my third child, and they go year round. So I had to find something that would grant me kind of the fluctuations
To
in
be at
summer.
home with your kiddos.
Yeah, so I ended up just within the last 4 years transferring over into the public sector. So this is technically my third public school. The para position was in a public school, but I was only there for about a month.
What are the differences, do you think, that you have found between public school that you're in now and the private sector? I don't know. Is that private sector?
Yeah, I mean,
that you were in with the correctional facility.
I would say the technology use. So they all have computers within the school. It's literally school within a prison. So the kids will leave their units and they will go into their actual high school, and it's decorated like a high school. They've got a giant mascot on the wall as soon as you walk in. They've got classrooms that they rotate to, and I mean, it's set up like an actual high school. They all have the computers, which all their software, you're guiding the teaching along with them doing the actual work. They do Edgenuity, and so they had Edgenuity in the facility. It was called Odyssey and Play-Doh, and then they switched over to Apex, but it was the same kind of setup like what we do for our online schooling here. All their projects and stuff were off the computer, and so that we would set that up. But they didn't have access to phones. They didn't have access to really music unless we played it. So the technology was a huge switch, going into a public school where everybody has access to their phone. I didn't have to worry about that when I was there.
I think one of the things, number one, hats off to you for taking something like that on to teach at a correctional facility. But the other thing that always surprises me when I listen to you talk about it is the fact that I think for a layman who has never taught in that kind of an atmosphere, you describe, I would think, never being in that kind of atmosphere whatsoever at all, that it would be so brutally difficult to teach that kind of a student. But you describe it as being a more, I'm gonna call it what it is, a more respected
Very.
place to teach. And I'm talking about that you are more highly respected teaching in a detention facility
Mhm.
than you are in a public school setting.
100%. You got to think when they're locked up, and we had stints where kids were in there for 6 months to kids that were in there for 5 years. Um, the only time that they really get to get out is school and recreation. Recreation lasts for about an hour, but school is the entire day, and it was an honor to going to school. So if you're acting up, you were locked down. You didn't get to go to school. The school was printed out on paper and hand delivered by an officer or a teacher. And if you were lucky, the teacher would communicate with you through your door, if you were lucky. I didn't do it a whole lot with the boys. I didn't like going on the boys' units. But the girls' unit, I did private classes with the girls. And
Now, did you teach boys and girls though?
so
You just didn't go one on one with
my first year there, I was strictly with the boys. So like the boys would come into the school and I only worked with the boys. My second year, I ended up transitioning into being kind of like the advisory teacher for the girls.
Mhm.
Now imagine, it doesn't seem like a lot, but 18 girls. That's all we had in that population at the very beginning. Once Larnard shut down, we ended up transitioning all of the Larnard residents over into the Kansas juvenile. So we ended up having an influx of like 100 and something kids that came in. And so we had 19 girls at one time in one classroom. Now, that doesn't seem like a whole lot. Like when we're in this public, okay, 19 is about average. But they live together. They're with each other 24/7. And then to have them in the classroom, I would much rather teach 25 boys than those 19 girls.
Yeah.
Because they were brutal. I
Yeah.
mean, the girls were very, very brutal, more so towards each other than to the teachers. But I don't know. I enjoyed it. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. We tried to make it as, I guess, real of a school for them as possible, because a lot of them would never ever make it back into a public school because they
Right.
wouldn't be accepted.
What was the difficulty, the biggest difficulty that you found when you went from a private sector like the juvenile detention center to public school? This is your second public school
The
that you've been
second,
in,
yeah,
correct?
the second one after there. I would say for me, they talk about when students get out of prison having to adapt to their environment, and it's culture shock. And I'm not talking about culture as race or ethnicity. I'm talking about learning how to do everything all over again. And that's what I knew. I knew, counting every single pencil and ensuring that I didn't have a paper clip on my desk. And, that was very different coming into the public, of knowing, okay, I can leave this stuff out on my desk. I don't have to follow that kid to the bathroom. They can do it on their own.
Right.
I don't have to keep A and B student away from C student because they're, in opposing sets. I mean, it was very different. And I noticed coming into the public sector, they're more closed off and reserved, whereas in the facility, they opened up very quickly because they learned that you were there for them. You weren't there to make money,
Right.
because you could make way more out in the public schools than you could in the facility. And so they knew that you were there for them. And so I think coming out into public schools, not instantly having that connection with a kid and really having to figure out how to develop it has been the hardest
Yeah.
thing.
understand that.
It's getting easier. Prior, I wasn't allowed to share anything about myself with my kids within the prison. It was called undue familiarity, meaning they couldn't know your first name, they couldn't know if you were married, they couldn't know if you have kids, they weren't allowed to know where you grew up. I mean, it was very trying to keep you separate. Well, how in the world are you supposed to build a relationship with a kid if you're not able to share information about your life? And so I found it really, really hard first entering into public. Oh, is this allowed? Like, are they allowed to know that I've got a child? Are they allowed to know that I'm married? Like, what is too much?
Right.
And I think that's probably across the board anyways in general, but it was very, very hard to kind of loosen up my sharing of information.
Yeah.
So
I understand that.
So what about you?
Well, I come from I guess you would call it a family of educators. My grandmother was an educator, one of them. Both of my parents, my mom taught elementary school, primarily third grade, for well over 30 years. My dad was a football coach and a PE teacher and driver's ed. I have two brothers, one of which went into education. Both of my sister-in-laws, I call them sisters, were educators. It's just something that was in my family.
In the blood.
Yeah, I guess. And I remember when I was 18 years old, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life, which, by the way, in my opinion, is ridiculous. Nobody should know what they want to do with the rest of their life when they're 18 years old. That's a podcast for another day.
Yes. Learning curve.
Yeah. They sat me down and said, you know what, we'll support you, whatever you decide to do. But please don't go into education. I thought, oh, okay. So I didn't. I changed my major, I don't know how many times, before I finally settled in on communication. And little did I know when I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Communication that there's really literally nothing that you can do with it. I just knew I liked to communicate. I thought I was pretty good at it. So I went into management and hated it and decided that's not what I wanted to do. So quit and became a paraeducator. And I found my purpose, what I knew that I was supposed to do. And I remember even when I was in high school, my English teacher, Mrs. Anderson, we had to write one time about what we thought that we wanted to do. And I remember watching my dad coach and just teach, and had such a positive impact on so many young people. I thought, man, that's awesome how he does that. I think that'd be really cool to do. Never really given any thought to it, but I did know that if I did go into education someday, I would definitely want to coach.
And what'd you end up coaching?
Volleyball. Yeah. Loved it. Miss it.
How long did you coach for?
11 years, 12 years.
And you've been teaching for?
This is my 17th year.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it was a blast. It was a blast. And huge part of my heart. It will always have a part of my heart. But I was a para for a couple of years and went back and got another degree to teach. And I remember one time the former school that I was at had somebody call up. I don't know if it was a student at the local college. I don't know, a reporter, but something they wanted to do. They were writing a paper or something to that fact about education. And she called up to my room on my plan period. And she said, hey, I got this person on the phone. They want to ask you some questions about why you teach. Can I patch them through? And I said, well, sure. So I was all gearing up like, oh, what am I going to say? I've got to make this sound really good. And I just remember when she asked me, why do you continue to teach? Why are you in education? As I thought about the answer, I started crying. I felt like a fool, but it there is something really, really special about influencing a young person to realize their worth and their potential, no matter where it is that they've come from and no matter who they are.
Yeah.
And that is the real essence of where education, I believe, has gotten lost. I don't care. It's taboo to say this. I know that I feel uncomfortable saying it. I don't care what I teach. Maybe that's not the right thing. I mean, I'm a good teacher.
I think you care about what you teach, but you're not putting a heavy emphasis
Yeah,
on
that's a good way to put it.
the state standards
Yeah.
or teaching to the test.
Yeah.
And we hear that constantly of
Constant. It
teaching
is
to the test.
like a hammer just being drilled into your temple. And I'm like, what? Really, truly? I think to myself often, I know that I had to take all of these math classes when I was in high school. And I know that I took all of these English classes when I was in high school. By the way, English is the only class that you are required, at least here, to have 4 complete
I think in the state
years
of Kansas,
of it. Yeah, in the
it's
state.
4.
Yeah. But you know what? If I weren't an English teacher, what would I need that for? And that is taboo to say too, as an educator. You need to know it because number one, you need to learn how to learn things that you don't necessarily want to learn.
And I think that's straight across the board with
Yeah.
courses in general.
Yeah, I do too. It's the moments of a teacher reaching me well beyond whatever their subject matter was. That's why I do it. We talk a lot about the things that students go through these days. And just for you all that are listening out there, Martin and I are 2 different generations.
Yes.
I am total Generation X. Are you what? Are you millennial? Are you on the
I'm
cusp?
technically right on the cusp.
Yeah.
I don't like to say that I'm a millennial. I try not to associate with them. I feel like I'm more wise beyond my years.
You are, I would say
So-
that. Sometimes I'm much younger.
Yes.
More than I am. But just so you all know, there are lots of things. We're wonderful friends and great coworkers, but there are a lot of things that we don't agree on.
Absolutely.
It doesn't keep us from
Oh no.
loving each other
We
or
agree
anything
to
like that. We do
disagree
agree to
and
disagree.
don't let it bother us.
Yeah, but it's those teachers that still, it's they love what they do because of the influence that they get to have on the kids that sit in their classrooms.
Yeah.
It's more than just, for me at least, it's more than you hear teachers say, seeing that student get it, after they've tried a million times and their eyes light up, and that's great. I am not denouncing that whatsoever, but that's not even it for me.
Yeah, but their eyes light up when they win a video game.
They do, right? Yeah. Which they try and play in class,
They
by the
do.
way.
Go Guardian.
This
Yeah.
podcast is not attributed to Go Guardian.
No. Yes.
No, just
No
kidding.
sponsorship
No
there.
sponsorship.
I mean, unless they would like.
You can come on, Go Guardian. Why do you continue to teach, especially in 2024, Martin? Why are you still here?
That is a good question, and I think I probably ask myself that every day.
Yeah.
It's definitely not for the pay.
Ditto.
I will say that my student loan debt is probably more than what I get paid on a yearly basis, but it's definitely I love my coworkers, Penny especially. But I always talk about how high school sucked. I hated high school as a kid, yet here I am teaching it. But high school was just awful, atrocious. People were mean. I had very, very few people that I ran around with. I had a lot of trauma as a teen. And school was not a place I wanted to be. However, there were 3 classes that I enjoyed, my art, my English, and my music class. And those 3 teachers are the teachers that really inspired me and encouraged me to come. And so I look back at the influence, not even the education that they provided, but that sense of, I guess, being there for me when things seemed like they weren't going to get any better. And I'm hoping that one day I can see that I've done that with some other students. I guess I'm here to hope that they won't hate high school as much as I hated high school.
I think every kiddo needs a teacher like that, though. Nowadays, it's really rough. The struggle is real, and not even for just our students, but for us too.
Yes.
I think this year, more than any other year, was the most horrific year for me in teaching. I think I cried
so many times.
so many times.
Is
Thinking,
there a button for that?
It was a terrible start to a year. But it's the relationships that you finally start to build, and the trust between, yourself and your students, and letting them in a little bit, and they let you in a little
Absolutely.
bit. And, we talk about social emotional learning and all of this
Mumbo jumbo.
new mumbo jumbo that's come down the pipe. And in all honesty, in my own opinion, that's some of the essence of what you need to be teaching and worming your way into every single lesson.
Well, it's what we already do.
What you should
They just
already be doing.
Stamped a label on it.
Yeah. I think back to that phone call that I was talking about before, this lady asking me why I teach and why I got so teary-eyed is because even though we talk about labels, even though people have stamped such a label on education, and some educators have stamped that label on there, and quite frankly, it really peeves me off because that's not every educator. And it is still, in my eyes, an honorable position. We see your sons and daughters more than you see your sons and daughters.
Especially in the high school level.
Yes. Yeah. And so, there may be things about them that, that they're going through or struggling with. And every single person needs that kind of person in
Absolutely.
their life, whether it's an adult to an adult like you and I are with
Right.
each other. But it really is, it's an honor for me still to be a teacher. And that's probably why I'm still here.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Well, I think over the next several weeks, you'll be listening to us kind of banter back and forth.
Yeah.
About kind of our struggles and tribulations and triumphs.
yeah. And definitely just what's real
Yes.
versus what's not.
And we will figure out a way, if you guys have comments, that you can post them and maybe we'll get to them.
Take questions.
We will be having our first guest speaker here in the coming weeks.
Yes.
A former teacher, colleague of ours that
Yes.
has spread her wings and flown the coop
It was supposed to be 3 of us
doing this podcast.
doing this podcast together, but she was called to do bigger and greater things than where she was, and we know that she's doing an awesome job, even though we miss her.
Very, very much.
Yes.
But,
So, all right.
Final bell.
Final bell. You got schooled today.
We will see you soon.
All right. Bye.